holiday. It seems like we have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the Days of Atonement. And then, it's another holiday. It just happens to be the same month. But the truth of the matter is, if you look deeper, you see that there is a very deep connection between the festival of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, as well as the festival of Sukkot and Simchat Torah. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur is God coming out to the people, God coming out, like you say, coming out to the field, greeting us, connecting with us, having this divine introspective relationship. And that's what takes place in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. We pray to God. We call him Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. And it's like being in a very intense connection. If you were to be with the King in his private chambers, and you're able to spend time with the King, and you're able to talk about him, and talk about your situation, talk about your life, and discuss things that are happening, and see how we can make things better. That is what Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is. It's greeting the King in his home. Unlike in Elul, it's greeting the King in the field. It's about greeting the King in his home. And what happens after you have this deep, intimate moment with the Father or the King? You finally come home to your Father, who is the King. You have this very intimate relationship, which is a 10-day experience. You pour out your heart. You say everything that has happened over the last year. And what happens afterwards? Once you go through that process of expressing yourself and opening up and praying and feeling and emotions, then what happens afterwards? There's always a party afterwards, right? There's a celebration. It's joyous. What's the best way to do it? You're happy. We all know, even nowadays, if you have in the people who have special intimate moments with the president, even. So what always happens? Someone comes from afar and they're coming to greet the president. So they go and they have their meeting and they talk business, whatever it is that has to be discussed. Then afterwards, you have a party. You sit down, you have a meal together, and you talk. And the same thing is with us. It comes Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. We talk business for the first 10 days. And then we go and we celebrate. Sukkot is referred to in the Torah as Zman Simchaseinu, the time of our rejoicing. And it's expressed in many different ways, as we talked last week. The rejoicing, you have the rejoicing the way it's expressed in the lulav, which the lulav is it's like the victory symbol, holding it up high, the lulav. You have the sukkah, which is God's embrace of us, celebration, being surrounded by the mitzvah of sukkah, being in the four walls of holiness, of godliness. And sukkah, the word schach, has a numerical value of 100, referring to the 100 blasts of the shofar. So it's everything that was in a serious, solemn way in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And on Simchat Torah, it's now gonna, and Yom Kippur and Sukkot, it's now going to be out. We're going to celebrate, and we talked about the celebration of the drawing of the water, Simchat Beit HaShueva. And that's the first days of Sukkot. And then it comes to the last days of Sukkot. Shmini Atzeret literally is translated as restriction of the 8th day. The simple meaning is that on the 8th day, we're restricted from working. In the temple, there were 7 days of Sukkot. He brought a total of 70 bullocks, offering prayer every day for all the nations, 70 nations of the world. At Shmini Atzeret, there was only one. And as Rashi says like this, it says, why? If you count them, it begins the first day you bring 13, second day 12, next day 11, 10, 9, etc., totaling 70. But then the last day is only one bull as a sacrifice. Why is that? Because this is like children, says Rashi, this is like children taking leave of their father. And their father says, it's difficult for me to depart from you. For my sake, postpone your departure and remain with me for one more day. So it's one more day. So you have a big party. Again, going back to the analogy of the king. You have the family comes home to have their intimate time with the king. Then he throws a big party for everyone. Let's go celebrate. Everyone come. All the ministers come. Everyone come. Everyone that has connection to the palace comes. And the party goes, and it's a 7-day party. Then the king says, thank you everyone for joining. We had a great time. And the children get up to leave. And they say, that's it. We had our time. And God says, no. I want you to stay with me one more day. You're my family. You stay one more day. My family stays extra. So he says, it's difficult for me to part with you. For your sake, postpone and remain with me for one more day. So for 7 days, we have 70 bullocks for all the nations. But on this day, God says, remain with me one more day. This is going to be your day. And that is, in a deeper sense, what the 8th day is. It's not just a holiday. It's a conclusion of everything that happened during the last month. It's the culmination of everything that happened. Everything is revealed in a deep way. The bond that's forged on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot is now absorbed and internalized in this last day. Can you imagine the joy of the children knowing that their father is going to be with them one more day? So although it's called Shmini Atzeret, which means the 8th day to rest, it isn't the 8th day of Sukkot. It's really an independent festival. And there are multiple distinctions between Shmini Atzeret, which, by the way, refer to both Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah, which is both days together. And the first day is referred to as Shmini Atzeret, the 8th day of rest. There's a number of differences in the last days of Sukkot as opposed to the first 7 days. Number one, on Shmini Atzeret, there's no longer a mitzvah to eat in the sukkah. Nevertheless, many people have the custom, as Chabad does, to still eat in the sukkah, even on Shmini Atzeret, but you don't recite a blessing on the sukkah as you do for the first 7 days. It is a different name, not only by the way we call it, but the Amidah refers to it differently. If you look in the prayers, all the days of Sukkot are referred to as Chag HaSukkot Hazeh, the festival of Sukkot is Man Simchasein, the time of our rejoicing. You take a look in the Siddur on Shmini Atzeret, it says, Yom Shmini Atzeret HaChag Hazeh. The day of Shmini Atzeret, the 8th day of resting. That's the way it's referred to. So it's referred to differently in the liturgy, in the prayer, in the Kiddush. It's referred to differently in its own holiday. And finally, we recite the blessing of Shechianu. Now, this is important to note because Pesach, Passover, has a very similar setup. You have 2 days in the beginning of the holiday, 2 days at the end of the holiday, which we call Achron Shal Pesach, Shvi Shal Pesach, the last days of Passover. It's a similar setup. You have the first days, then you have a few intermediate days, and then you have the last days. However, by Passover, you do not recite Shechianu. Shechianu means that you're making a blessing for something that is new, for something that you're experiencing that you haven't experienced in a long time, in roughly about a year. You could only make that blessing if the holiday is considered a new holiday. But if it's a holiday that you already celebrated a whole week, you don't make a Shechianu. The fact that we make a blessing Shechianu on Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah means that we're saying that this is a new holiday that we did not celebrate the past 7 days. It's a completely new holiday. So we see that although it's very much associated with Sukkot, both on a spiritual level as well as a pragmatic level, it's very much its own holiday. And so we're going to see the way it's celebrated is completely different. Now, in Israel, Shmini Atzeret is celebrated for one day, just like the first day of Sukkot is celebrated one day. Every single holiday in Israel is celebrated one day, aside for Rosh Hashanah. It's a little bit beyond the scope of this class to explain why it is, but briefly, because the holiday is really meant to be one day, but back then, before they had Facebook and before they had text messaging and WhatsApp messages or whatever it is, the way that they designated the new month was by two witnesses coming and saying that they saw the new moon. And basically, without getting into the details, Rosh Chodesh, the first of the month, could either be 1 or 2 days. The problem is that not always does the message get out. They didn't have a calendar set up the way it is. It came by witnesses. And the point is that those who were outside of the land of Israel not always got the message of what day the new month started. It could have been a 29-month day, or it could have been a 30-day month. So the point is that those who were in the diaspora didn't know when the holiday was. Nowadays, we know when the holiday is, but we keep the tradition of 2 days. Anyway, the point is that in Israel, they still keep only 1 day, Yom Tov. If you go to Israel, you only keep 1 day. Now, for most holidays, it's not a major deal because there isn't really much difference between the first day and the second day. Passover, first day Passover, second day Passover, you do basically the same Seder, same thing, right? So you're just doing it again, what you did. So, okay, you do 1, do 2. Sukkot, first day of the Sukkot, basically doing the same thing. Rosh Hashanah, they actually keep 2 days Rosh Hashanah, but still basically the same thing. Okay, if it falls on Shabbos, it's a little different, but basically the same idea. You're saying the prayers. Shavuot is the same thing. However, when it comes to Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah, it's very, very different. Because Shmini Atzeret is basically a simple holiday with not much celebration, aside for certain prayers, as we'll get into soon. But Simchat Torah is a completely different thing. So, therefore, on Simchat Torah, they in Israel have to celebrate what we call today Simchat Torah, which is the second day of the holiday they celebrate on the same day. In a bit of a deeper aspect, every aspect of Torah can be explained in a literal and in a rational way, but there's also a deeper point, and that is that Israel is the Holy Land, and therefore souls are holier when being in the land of Israel. And so the soul can be nourished more quickly in the land of Israel on the holiday. So they don't need to have an extra day to get the energy of the holiday. They could get that in 1 day. We in the diaspora, we don't have that kind of godly energy that they have in Israel. So we need the extra day to let it seep in, to really get the energy of the holiday going. But living in Israel, they're a more spiritual state. They don't need that extra time. So the last day of the holiday is called Simchat Torah, which literally means the day of the rejoicing of the Torah. Because on that day, we read the last portion of the Torah. But in Israel, it's done on Shmini Atzeret, and outside of Israel, it's done the next day on Simchat Torah. What does it mean we finish the Torah? So as you know, in the synagogue, every Shabbos, we read a portion of the Torah. So there's roughly about 52, there's 54, whatever, portions of the Torah, enough to go over the year. we miss a few because of the holiday, so we double some, whatever. But the point is that 53, 54 Porsches, and basically we finish it in the year. And we finish reading the Torah every single year on Simchat Torah. So, you may ask, the timing of the cycle is a little bit curious. Because it would make sense to begin the cycle at the beginning of the year. If it's not possible, because we're busy with Rosh Hashanah. We begin on the Shabbos after Shavuos, when we receive the Torah. So, why don't we begin the cycle of Torah reading after Sukkot? In other words, what is the association of Simchat Torah and the fact that we finish reading the Torah on that day? What is the connection with concluding the Torah on the day of Simchat Torah? And the answer is that it's not only about the cycle. But let's take a look a little bit at history as it goes throughout the year. Now, let's see if you'll be able to keep up with me on this, okay? The Jewish people left Egypt, what day? Passover, right? Which is in the Hebrew calendar, it is the 14th day of the month of Nisan. Okay, 15th day, whatever. 15th day of the month of Nisan is Passover. That is considered the first month in the Jewish calendar. Now, the next month after Nisan is a month called Iyar. That's known as the month that we have the second Passover, the month of Iyar. The next month is called Sivan. Okay, how many months are we at? 3 months. Okay, how many months in the year? 12 months. We got Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, 3 months. The 6th of Sivan, they received the Torah at Mount Sinai. Okay. Now, what happens? They have the revelation at Mount Sinai, and Moses now goes up and he says, I'm going to bring back the tablets with me. For how many days did he go up to the mountain? 40 days, right? Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, was on the 6th day of Sivan. The next day, the 7th of Sivan, he went up. Okay, so at the 7th of Sivan, he went up and he was there for 40 days. 30 days later would be the 7th of, what's the next month, is Tammuz. Okay. Add 10 days, and you have not the 7th of Tammuz, but the 17th of Tammuz. Does that name ring a bell? 17th of Tammuz. Anyone? Do you know what the 17th of Tammuz is? It's a very sad day on the Jewish calendar. It's actually a fast day. 17th of Tammuz begins a period of what's known as the 3 weeks of mourning for the Jewish people. We fast on that day. It's a day that the tablets were broken because it was 40 days later. After Moses went up, 40 days later, he came down, and what happened? The tablets were broken on that day. Later on in history, other things happened, such as they breached the walls of the city of Jerusalem on the 17th of Tammuz and other things. So now we're up to 5 months, the 17th of Tammuz, okay? Moses comes down, he breaks the tablets on the 17th of Tammuz. We're at 5 months now. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz. Sorry, 4 months. Okay, 4 months. For a month and a half, Moses deals with all the repercussions of the breaking of the tablets. The month of Av, we know, the 9th of Av, right? That's also another sad day. It's known as the day of the destruction of the temple, but what else happened on the 9th of Av? It was a day when people were dying from the sin of the golden calf. on that day, the 9th of Av. Then, on the 6th month, the month of Elul, right? What's the month of Elul? We just celebrated the month of Elul. Moses goes up on the first day of the month of Elul. He goes back up to get the second tablets. He's there for how many days? For 40 days, right? Elul, from the first of Elul till the first of what's the next month after Elul? Tishrei. Okay? First of Elul to the first of Tishrei is 30 days. Add 10 days from the first of Tishrei to the 10th of Tishrei. What is the 10th of Tishrei? Yom Kippur. We just had it yesterday. Yesterday was the 10th of Tishrei. So, what happened? Moses came back on the 10th of Tishrei with the second set of tablets. And it's on that day that God officially forgave the Jewish people, the 10th day of Tishrei. Now it's starting to make sense, huh? Now it's all starting to come together. So what are we celebrating on Simchat Torah? There's 2 days of the year when we celebrate the Torah. The first day of the year is Shavuot. We celebrate the giving of the Torah, Shavuot. But that's not when we celebrate the completion of the Torah. When are we celebrating the completion of the Torah? On the festival that we're celebrating and we're rejoicing the fact that God forgave us and God atoned all our sins on Yom Kippur. We go and we dance and we sing for 7 days. We're celebrating. And now we say, now we're going to finally finish the Torah. Now we celebrated the fact that God atoned for everything that we had. God gave us a new Torah now. The one that Moses broke, he's now giving that to us again. And that's celebrating at the end of the festival of Sukkot. Isn't that incredible? So the tablets which Moses inscribed, the 10 commandments after Shavuot, they didn't survive. Moses shattered them. Now we're celebrating the new tablets that Moses brought. In a deeper sense, through the first set of tablets, though it was a wonderful gift, but they, so to speak, rejected it with the golden calf. Why? Because they really weren't prepared for it. They didn't fix themselves to be able to receive it. The second tablets may have not had the same revelation, spiritual revelation of the tablets, but they were a different people. The Jewish people were an elevated people. They're more powerful, more sincere people. That's what Teshuvah does. Teshuvah takes the knot and ties it much stronger than it was on your own. In the words of the Rabbi, repentance demonstrates that Torah is attached to our very essence, and we cannot sever our connection with it. Even if we break away from God through sin, God forbid, it is only temporary. In the end, we will certainly return to our true state of being, devotion to God. We complete our Torah reading on this day because the ultimate completion of Torah study is the total integration of the Torah with the very essence of the Jew. And so therefore we complete the Torah on Simchat Torah. Okay. Now you say, well, shouldn't we, based on that, shouldn't we do it on Sukkot, not Simchat Torah? So, number one, there's not always a Shabbos then. So it's not always a Shabbos right after Yom Kippur like this year. You go straight into the holiday. But it's also about being able to channel the holiness of the mundane and make it something meaningful and be able to take that energy of the holiday and bring the energy together with the joy of the Torah. Okay, let's get a little practical now. On Shmini Atzara, we light a candle. The proper time to light a candle is 18 minutes before sunset. This year, it's going to be Shabbos, as is the first day of Sukkot, going to be on Shabbos. And so therefore you must make sure to light before, even though other holidays you're allowed to light candles on the holiday, not this year. If you're planning to pray at home, the evening service is a special, it's a typical, as the same thing that we said last week about Sukkot. We begin with the prayer about Shabbos. We begin with the Lichadodi as we do it before Shabbos. And then we basically sing as we would at every single Shabbos and holiday. And then when it comes to the Amidah, we turn to the festival Amidah. And in that festival Amidah, we add in the line that says, instead of the festival of Sukkot, we say the festival of Shmini Atzeret. Now, after the Amidah, we do something called Hakafot. Hakafot is dancing with the Torah. As much as the joy of Sukkot is, it doesn't compare to the joy of Simchat Torah. The fact that we complete the entire Torah propels us to take the Torah in hand, and that's around the synagogue. The fact that we're celebrating, the fact that we're completing the Torah, we want to dance with the Torah, we want to rejoice with the Torah. It says in the Code of Jewish Law, we recall the last day of the festival of Simchat Torah because we rejoice and make a feast in honor of the completion of the Torah. It says the Shulchan Aruch, it is customary in these parts to remove the Torah scroll from the ark and sing praises to God. It's also customary to dance around the Torah table and the Torah scrolls, and this is how we express our joy. Now, the truth is, every time we do a mitzvah, it has to be done joyfully. We have to show joy. But this is even more because this is the Torah. This is everything that we have, that we lived for. This is what kept us who we are for generations. Generation after generation, what is it that kept us as a people? It's the Torah. And we go and we celebrate with the Torah and we dance with the Torah. And the Torah, however, remains closed. We don't read from the Torah, although some people do have the custom. We don't have the custom to read from the Torah, not even on Simchat Torah evening. And why don't we read from the Torah? Because this is a way of demonstrating that the Torah belongs to everyone the same. Once you start opening the Torah and reading it, so some people can read it better, some people can read it less. Some people can read it at all. Some people know Hebrew. Some people don't know Hebrew. But to hold the Torah and to dance with the Torah, who can't do that? Everyone can do that. It doesn't take much to be able to dance with the Torah. A little child can dance with the Torah. Anyone can dance with the Torah. And so the truth is that our bond with the Torah transcends even the scholars among us. The Torah is divine wisdom. And we are, and as much as we understand, and as much as the greatest scholar can understand the Torah, it's always going to be just a drop in the bucket for the Torah's infinite wisdom. Because it's God's wisdom. God is infinite. So as much as we understand, it's still going to be limited. And moreover, when God gave us the Torah, it's not only a gift of wisdom. It was God himself being given in the Torah to us. And this can't be understood or celebrated intellectually. All you can do is take the Torah and start dancing with it and be happy with it. In fact, it can be said that in Simchas Torah, we become extensions of the Torah. The Torah itself wants to dance. The Torah says, let me dance. Let me dance the fact that I'm here. After 3,500 years, I'm still around and I haven't been changed. Not one word has been changed. And the Torah is screaming out, please take me. Dance with me so that I myself can celebrate. Now, there's a number of different customs. This is not a biblical law. It's not even a rabbinic law. This is a custom, the idea of hakafot, dancing with the Torah. It's held twice in Israel and 3 times in the diaspora. Both evenings it's held. We do the hakafot. Although some people don't have the custom to do it the first night, the Chabad custom is to do it even the first night. So on Shmini Atzeret, the eve of Simchat Torah, excuse me, the eve of Simchat Torah and the day of Simchat Torah, 3 times. We begin with a prayer called Ata Haresa. Now, if you were here by the Torah celebration, you got a little booklet, so you remember that we read that. That's basically taken from the Simchat Torah liturgy. Ata Haresa are verses of the Torah that talks about the greatness of the Torah. It talks about our relationship with the Torah. It talks about our relationship with God. And we read these verses as an introduction to taking out the Torah. When we complete all 17 passages, we repeat them another 2 times. So we say Ata Haresa 3 times. The Torah scrolls are then removed from the ark, and each scroll is assigned to someone to carry. The people carrying the Torahs parade around the bima, just as we talked about the Hoshainus and Sukkos. Over here also, you go around the bima, followed by the others in the congregation. As they circle the bima, the first person in line leads the congregation reciting the passages. And there's a number of passages. There are 7 sets of passages. You go to the first set of passages, you go around. Second set of passages, you dance a little bit, you sing songs, you sing different songs. Sorry, fly flying around. At the end of the dance, other people in the group are assigned to lead the Torah. You circle the bima again. You go a second set, a third set again. There's seven sets. Number 7, which is very significant in Judaism. After the dancing, we conclude the service. You go into the sukkah on the first night of Shmini Atzeret, and you go eat dinner. If you're celebrating at home, you gather your family, you can do the same thing. Even if you don't have a Torah, you can take a chumash and dance with that. There's a Torah written on it. Express your joy to be able to have this gift of the Torah. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schneerson, the father of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he was exiled in the Soviet Union to a distant village in Kazakhstan for the crime of supporting Jews in their observance of Judaism. He was the rabbi of the community, and his felonies were things such as arranging Jewish schools, arranging Jewish weddings, bar mitzvahs, making sure that they have matzah on Pesach, making sure that Jews have their needs. Those were his crimes. So he was sent into exile, where tragically he passed in Kazakhstan. So and then his wife traveled there to be with him. Eventually, she was able to immigrate to the United States through certain organizations that helped her get out. And she was able to spend the last few years of her life with her son, the Rebbe, who was then living in the United States. So she would later relate that while she was with her husband in Kazakhstan, they spent their first Simchat Torah in exile in a small room. And as you can imagine, they didn't have a Torah scroll, nor did they even have a table. All that he had was a book of Tanya, which is a seminal text of the Chabad Hasidim. He held it, and he celebrated, and he danced with that. It was the only book of Torah that he was able to get his hands on, so he danced with that. And she could tell that her husband was transported to a different time and different place, and he wasn't confined to that small room. He transcended the limitations of their plague and their place and their exile, and he celebrated Simchat Torah. So even if you don't have a Torah, celebrate how you are, where you are. Celebrate the fact that you could study Torah. We don't have those severe constraints, but there are people who don't want to leave their homes due to the current COVID situation. So know that even if you don't want to, you still could celebrate. That's the hakafot. A few more things about the holiday. The Kiddush, as we mentioned, the Yom Tov meal is done inside the sukkah. So you eat in the sukkah, you make Kiddush, you make a blessing. This would be the first time that we finally go back to dipping our challah in salt and not eating round challah. All the way until Hoshana Rabbah, which we talked about last week, which is the seventh day of Sukkot. It's customary to keep many of the Rosh Hashanah traditions, eating round challah, dipping in honey. As a matter of fact, as we mentioned last week, some people even dip apple in honey on Hoshana Rabbah, because that's considered the end of the time of judgment. But on Simchat Torah, that officially ends. Also, LeDavid, the Psalm number 26, is ceased to be recited on Simchat Torah, on Shmini Atzeret. Okay. The morning service is basically like any Shabbat or any holiday. We recite Hallel as we do on every holiday. And there's special Torah reading, which is the Torah reading from the end of the end of the portion of Re'eh, which is recited anytime Yizkor is recited, except for Yom Kippur. And then Yizkor is recited on Shmini Atzeret. Now, typically, Yizkor is recited on the last day of the holiday, but in order not to detract from the celebration of Simchas Torah, so we do it on Shmini Atzeret. What do you do with Yizkor? If you can't make it to the shul, you take a moment to connect with your loved ones, you make a pledge to tzedakah in their merit, you read Yizkor prayers, and you take a moment to reflect and connect with them. And you do anything that you would do for Yizkor, just like it's been done on Yom Kippur, just like it's been done on Shavuos, just like it's been done on the last day of Passover. We did all these things. Wow. Think about Passover. I mean, it's just a couple months ago. It feels like ages ago. The Musaf prayer on the first day, meaning on Shmini Atzeret, is very special because on the Musaf of Shmini Atzeret, we begin to change our tune in the sense that we start having a different prayer. Until now, we have been praying for dew, Morid Hatal. On the first day of Shmini Atzeret, first day of this festival, Shmini Atzeret, we begin to recite Mashiv Haruach Marad Geshem. We begin to pray for rain. Now, when do we stop praying for rain? On the first day of Passover. It wasn't done this year because there was no minyan Passover. On the first day of Passover, we start to pray for rain. We stop to pray for rain for the summer month. Now, Florida is a little different. We actually run an opposite schedule, but anyway. Now, really, we should start praying for rain on the first day of Sukkot, but that would be pretty counterproductive if we're starting to pray for rain in a day when we literally are meant to go outside and eat outside. All right, that would be very counterproductive. So therefore, we instead pray for rain on the last day of Sukkot, hoping that it will hold off. The rain will hold off during the time of Sukkot. So we begin to pray for rain. There's a special prayer that's found in the Siddur for rain. You can look in the Siddur, you'll see it there. After nightfall, candles are lit as they were in the previous night. Only this time, we don't say the Shabbos blessing as we did on the first night. The first night we do Lahadlik Ner Shel Shabbos, V'Shel Yom Tov. You sing for Shabbos and Yom Tov. Now it's only Lahadlik Ner Shel Yom Tov. And again, the same thing as the first night. You do the regular evening prayer, although you don't add anything for Shabbos. You do add a Havdalah prayer, which is one paragraph. And then you make Kiddush. In the Kiddush, you recite Havdalah as well, which is to close out the Shabbos. You say that prayer too. You no more have to eat in the sukkah. You could eat inside. And That's it. You make Kiddush. Now the custom is that we make Kiddush before we do Hakafot. Why? Why do we do that? In other words, the middle of davening, you're saying davening, that you make Kiddush before you do Hakafot. Why? For a very simple reason. Because you want to say L'chaim. If you want to really dance with real excitement, you need a little L'chaim, right? If you want to say L'chaim, you have to make Kiddush. So you make Kiddush so you could drink a little L'chaim. Very pragmatic Judaism. There's a lot of things that sound spiritual, but they're very simple. We recite Ataresa again, as we did the previous night. We recite it 3 times. We remove the Torah scrolls. We dance around the bima 7 times, just as we did in the previous night. And you dance all night. And this is the way we do it. And as long as you can, the more you dance, the better it is. Because all the energy, the spiritual energy, comes on Simchat Torah from dancing. If you want to get the blessings come from dancing. So if you dance for an hour, you'll get blessings for an hour. If you dance for 10 hours, you'll get blessings of 10 hours. In Chabad, they would dance all night. As a matter of fact, in the earlier years, in the 50s and early 60s, they would dance all night. Then at about 4 o'clock in the morning, on Simchat Torah morning, the Rebbe would come and would give and the Rebbe would come and teach a song at about 4 o'clock in the morning, a new song. One of those songs are the ones that we sang on Yom Kippur. Ki Anu Amecha. Remember we sang that? That was taught by the Rebbe on Simchat Torah at about 4 o'clock in the morning. So you dance all night. Then you wake up and you have services in the morning for Simchat Torah. What are the morning services? The beginning is very simple, just like any other holiday. Same thing, Hodu, Baruch She'amar. The holiday, you recite Hallel. And then things start to turn very, very different. We have the tradition that we recite Kiddush after Hallel, before Torah reading. Because before Torah reading, which remember is still in the morning, before Torah reading, we do Hakafot. We recite Ataresa 3 times. Then you go around, except going around the bima, we don't go around the bima 7 times, we go around only 3.5 times. And again, you dance. Then you return the ark, the scrolls to the ark. Then you take them out. You go and read from them. How many Torah scrolls do you take out? 3 Torah scrolls. The first Torah scroll, you read the portion of Zot HaBracha, the final portion of the Torah, and everyone gets an aliyah, and then you conclude the final aliyah. You recite together, Chazak, Chazak, V'nitz Chazek, as we do at the end of every single book. Be strong, let us be strengthened, and you conclude the entire Torah. But what happens once you complete reading the Torah? Then you have to start again. Now, it really wouldn't be conducive if you have to now go and start rolling the Torah from the end to the very beginning, right? That wouldn't be very, very practical. So what do? You have another Torah. Now we, thank God, have 3 Torahs now. We didn't always have. But you take out the second Torah, which should be already rolled to Bereshit, to the very, very beginning. And you start reading the Torah from a new Bereshit. You read the first Aliyah Bereshit. Then you read the Maftir. You return the Torahs to the Ark. You say a few more prayers, thanking God that we're able to complete the Torah. We say, Sisu v'simcha v'simcha Torah, come rejoice, the rejoicing of the Torah. And then you continue on to Musaf. The Rebbe says as follows. When Jews complete the Torah, they may think that they already have the entire Torah. So the message is yes. You have studied the entire written Torah, but you are still at the beginning. In fact, if you continue your studies, you'll see for yourself that everything that you already learned is insignificant relative to the Torah's true depth. One final thought. When you combine the letter of Lamed, the Torah's last letter, Yisrael, the Asar is Lamed, and the letter Bet, the Torah's first letter, you get the word Lev, which means heart. It teaches us that the Torah is the heart of the Jewish people like a heart. Torah is the essence and deepest dimensions of our lives. Just like a heart is always pumping, the Torah is pumping our spiritual energy of our people. That is how we celebrate Simchat Torah. Then you make Havdalah as Simchat Torah draws to a close. Chant Havdalah, and in the conclusion of the month of Tishrei, we take the energy and we say V'Yakov halach l'darka. Just as Jacob went on his way, we have to go on our way with taking the energy of everything that we got from the holiday and know that it doesn't end here. This is the way that we recharge our batteries, right? So you got to get in mode to fill up the tanks. Now, once you got filled up, once you packed up the car, now you're ready to take the trip of life. And then we take a trip throughout the year. And we start unpacking the whole year after we got all the energy of the high holidays. And that, my friend, is the celebration of Simchat Torah. So may we go from the holiday of Yom Kippur, we go directly into the Sukkot celebration, which we'll be doing this week, and then directly into Simchat Torah. And I should say, talking about Simchat Torah, we have to take upon ourselves to study more Torah. God willing, we will be unveiling a fantastic course, which I was supposed to teach at the end of last year because of COVID got postponed, which is called The Secret to the Bible. It's going to be a great course. So stay tuned, as well as another course about Mashiach. We're going to have more courses coming up, some of them maybe even in person. So I want to wish everyone a Shana Tova and a good Yantif, a good year. See you all soon.
Thank you. Great classes. Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining.